there was one point where I did not take my kids to family gatherings for 3 years because there was an incident at a family gathering. And the general consensus from the public, meaning at work where I teach, his school, and in my own family, was it's my parenting. Like, my parenting stinks, and that's why he's behaving like that. In that first week of changing his diet, and it wasn't, super clean. Like I said, he was doing those pizza pockets and the substitute type of foods, the chicken nuggets that I made for him. All of a sudden, one day, he starts coming out of his room with like kitchen trash bags with, I didn't know what was in them.
Christy, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, Dave, I found Carnivore actually through a pathway in my life that lasted for almost my whole life since I was a teenager, and I'm currently 48. I think a lot of us females are familiar with the whole let's diet, let's lose some weight here. So we go on this binge cycle followed by a restrict cycle, right? You restrict and then you binge, restrict and binge. And I did that for years and years. And then in February of 2023, I thought, well, I've gotta lose this weight, right? That I had succeeded in losing, but then gained right back, and decided to go keto just because I hadn't tried keto before. I had tried calorie restricting and over exercising and maybe low carb, but not really knowing how to do it. But I thought, let's try keto because that's something I've heard of. It's supposed to help people. And then this time, what made it stick or what made it different was I discovered Dr. Berry not too long after that. So then I learned about, okay, what are macros? How do we count them? That it should be meat-based and all of that. And that was February of 2023. Like I said, by June, I had just naturally gotten rid of the rest of the vegetables I was having. So the keto I was doing was mostly meat with like a few, a little bit of broccoli or a little bit of zucchini or whatever. And then it was just like I was lazy and I didn't want to cook the asparagus that day. So I didn't. And I just really liked the ribeye. So I would just have a little more of that. And that was when I thought, well, I better see if this is okay. And then sure enough, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of carnivores. And here we all are online. But the craziest part for me was that when I did finally find Carnivore, accidental as it may be, that's when I started realizing that there were so many other benefits besides weight loss. I had some mental health issues that I didn't even know I had. Like, if you had asked me, I would have said, no, I don't have any kind of mental health issues. But turns out I sure enough had a pretty bad case of social anxiety. I didn't want to be seen in public. I didn't want to go to the grocery store because people could see me. I wouldn't go for walks outside because people could see me. I would sometimes accept social invitations, but then later get out of them, like try to find a good excuse to get out of them because I didn't want to be around people, as well as, a whole host of other things. But I focus on the mental health aspect because actually both of my sons, but I want to talk about my youngest son today. He has ADHD, and the longer I was in, doing Carnivore and experiencing more of these benefits for myself, and then learning about, okay, like it's not just me having these mental health benefits, learning about people like Dr. Georgia Ede and Dr. Chris Palmer and their wonderful books, which I've since read after my son has tried this way of eating. I'm like, I got to find out the whys, behind all of this stuff. But, he's 15 and we've been struggling, oh man, his whole life, as long as I can remember, with these pretty horrible symptoms. And so I would say it kind of started when he was in preschool. So 3 years old, he would have these meltdowns in preschool to where they would have to physically pick him up and carry him to the office because he was just losing it. And we found an occupational therapist at that time who diagnosed him at that time with sensory integration processing disorder. And what that means is the brain sort of like all your senses, all your information coming in from your senses is hyper felt by the brain. And so it seems overwhelming. And for him, this was in all 5 of his senses. So not just sight or not just hearing. Some people might be familiar. Sometimes kids who have this will wear the noise canceling headphones, things like that. but he had it in all 5 of his senses. So at preschool, by the afternoon, he was just done. It was just all too overstimulating, and he would just lose his mind and throw a fit. And yeah, they'd have to carry him out of there pretty frequently. And, he continued to struggle with school, especially as the academic demands, got to be more, as he went into elementary school. And about 3rd or 4th grade is when he got the ADHD diagnosis, and that came because we were trying everything. So we paid for occupational therapy after that initial diagnosis out of pocket. As soon as and I'm a public school teacher, so he came to school with me. So I had a lot of, pull or sway, or I kind of know how to push the right levers and get things for him. We had done speech therapy at school to help him learn how to interact with other people and take turns and all of this kind of stuff in conversation. Then we kind of upped his services because his academics started to suffer, at which point we had him fully assessed, only to learn that his IQ was actually well above average, but he's struggling to just complete the work, to do the assignments. And the meltdowns honestly didn't stop. So when people say, oh, that was just his terrible twos or whatever, that's kind of what they're called over here, but they didn't stop. So he's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, melting down 2 or 3 times a week, at school, at home, wherever, over stuff that would be minor. So time to get ready for school, 2 or 3 times a week would turn into a major, like someone was crying. Either he was crying or I was, to try to get this child out the door was this Herculean task. Or take a shower, or brush your teeth, or clean your room, or come to the dinner table, And so we tried a lot of different interventions all through his childhood. So I've mentioned a couple, right? We did occupational therapy outside of school. Once he got older, we had that inside of school as well. We got him involved with the school counselor, so he would go and see her, the speech teacher at school. Then we did more occupational therapy outside of school. We did counseling outside of school to get him extra sessions. We did all the strategies of like, well, let's do like a timer, like how, a list of tasks that he could check them off, sticker charts for when he successfully does things that he's supposed to do. And every single one of those things was just an epic fail. So it would always end up, or not always, but the majority of the time, many times would end up in these meltdowns where he would just lose his mind. And I say that because later he wouldn't remember, that he had done that, but he would be throwing things, punching things, just on the floor, just flailing, and then later would not remember any of that. Like once he came back to himself, he would just go on like as if none of that had happened at all. But in that moment, you're saying, okay, well, here's your chart, or here's your timer, or here's your whatever. And he would start to lose it. And he would, he'd blame you. Well, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting ready for school because you're putting too much pressure on me by having this chart here. So then you would take the chart away. Well, you didn't give me my chart. So now how am I even supposed to get ready for school? And that would go for every single intervention that we ever tried. He was just like didn't want to do it. And I would say, with ADHD, there's a few symptoms that are kind of everybody knows about. Difficult to pay attention. You might be a little extra fidgety, things like that. But then there's a bunch of stuff that's under the surface of that that not everyone with ADHD has. And there's about 9 of those symptoms. And I'd say he has about 8 out of 9 of those other symptoms. So some of them being, emotionally immature. You can count on them being about 3 years behind. So if they're 10, they're acting like they're 7 emotionally. They don't, develop emotionally at the same rate. That's one. Not learning from consequences. So we would give him consequences, being good parents as we are. And like the next day he would just do the same thing again. And the next day he would do the same thing again, even though there would be consequences. Like there was consequences for this extremely destructive and negative behavior, but it didn't stop it from happening again. And they have a hard time sometimes learning from that. Another one is like a coexisting condition like anxiety or OCD. And his, although I didn't have it diagnosed, is ODD, and that's in about half to like 2/3. It's oppositional defiance disorder, meaning if the authority figure says it, you're pretty much not going to do it. You're going to argue, you're going to fight it. Unless you think it's your idea, it ain't happening. And so it was like, really, I lived my life walking on eggshells with my own child, just trying not to like set off this anger monster, because that's, with the emotional dysregulation, that was his main. He would just get angry no matter how many strategies. He had strategies and after strategy after strategy to try. We practiced the strategies, but then in real time, when the anger was coming on, that was it. Like once it was coming on, there was no stopping it. And we tried sports, we tried karate for a little while, for about a year. I mean, he melted down there. Getting him ready to go was like near impossible. So, and basically anything we tried, all the way up until later on, we even tried medication. I never wanted to try medication. It wasn't my first go-to move, but once he got into middle school, we're like, all right, well, nothing else has really worked. So, let's try this medication. And we finally got some that he didn't have to swallow a pill, because with his sensory integration processing, he has a hard time swallowing pills, texture issues in the mouth and all of that. And so that was finally, after fighting with the insurance for 2 or 3 years, we got one that was like in a powder form that we could stir up into a drink or into some food or something. And when he talks about this, he says, yeah, it did as advertised, that he feels like it calmed his body down. It made him kind of sit still and do what he's supposed to do, but he felt like a robot, like he wasn't the one controlling it. And he didn't like that at all. So that maybe lasted 2 or 3 months. But at the same time, we're still he's late every single day. He's fighting me on, all the things. Getting him to shower might be a 3-day process, because he just wouldn't go do it. And he would fight, and he would not want to even do something that simple. And so as I started off saying, I went carnivore and then started learning about, okay, these mental health conditions, like even things as serious as, bipolar and things like that, people are finding some relief with carnivore. But it's not like my son is 3 years old anymore. I can't say, here's your plate of food, eat it or nothing. He's now 15, and he is in high school. And, where I live, even like the school food is free. So breakfast and lunches are free. So I wouldn't even have to put money in his account. If he wanted to go get that food, he could go get it, and they would just give it to him. So I really had to have buy-in from him to give this a try. And so back in February, it had been a year for me, being on the proper human diet, keto and carnivore. And I just mentioned to him that, it's been shown that a diet like mine can help people with things like ADHD, and would he like to try it for 30 days? And then I crossed my fingers and I crossed my toes and waited to hear, what he would say. We had essentially tried everything else, and I never thought that I never ever thought that diet was a thing, was a lever to be tried or pulled or anything. But anyways, he did agree. He really thought about it. You could see he kind of looked up, and he was thinking. And he said that he would be willing to try it, but in true little sugar addict form, he said that he felt like he would have a hard time giving up ice cream. I thought that was a pretty honest answer, Dave. I was like, yeah, you're not wrong. That was like his thing that he thought would be probably the hardest to do. So I said, well, at the beginning, we'll find you something. Like, we'll find you something that you can do, so you won't have to give up your ice cream. I was thinking, Dr. Kiltz's ice cream, which is, heavy cream and eggs and maybe a little sweetener and, something like that. But I said, we'll find you something you can do, but let's give it a try. And so, yeah, at the very beginning, he started doing a lot of more like substitution foods, I would call them. So, he would do like the frozen pizza pockets and the frozen chicken nuggets, from the grocery store. And so we did like a Carnivore pizza pocket, and which is like a mozzarella cheese slice, some pepperoni and sausage, a little scoop of, low carb tomato sauce, and then another slice of cheese, and just stick them in the oven. And he would do that. And that tomato sauce, honestly, is the only plant material he's still eating, just to be clear. But I would make him carnivore chicken nuggets with just some ground chicken, some pork rind crumbs, some Parmesan cheese, a little bacon bits in there, and then put them in the air fryer. And he started off that way. But when I tell you, he's now transitioned to where, like, I have got a pork shoulder roast in the crock pot because that's one of his favorites. He loves also chuck roast. So, like, kind of the beef version of that. He loves chicken thighs with the skin on. He loves picanha like his mom. Picanha is my thing. And if I make picanha, he's all over that. So I would say that on his own, he's now leaning. He still eats the little pizza pockets sometimes, but most days it's like eggs, sausage, and some chuck roast. Like, he came out and got a couple pieces of leftover chicken for lunch today. And he does do dairy. So he does like whole milk and he'll do like cheese. So that's what his diet consists of. Okay. So now, how did this change his ADHD? Well, I used to fight with him about cleaning his room. I decided to stop that fight when he was about 8 or 9 years old because I was not going to win. I would ask him to clean his room. He wouldn't do it. I would go in there to help him. We tried all the strategies from the counselor. Don't just say clean your room. That's too overwhelming for someone with ADHD. You got to say clean up the Legos. And then you do the Legos. And then you got to say now, and kind of give him one thing at a time and let him tackle it that way. And it was just never successful, ever. When his room would get cleaned, I would be the one to clean it. He would be over there telling me, no, you can't throw that away. You can't. No, I don't want to get rid of that thing. And when I say throw that away, I'm talking old food from like a school party. Like, kids would give each other candy. He wouldn't eat it, but it'd still be there like a sucker from Valentine's Day. And he wouldn't want to throw it out. And I'm like, that's gross. Throw it away. Or like the box from a toy that he got 3 years ago, but it's like just the box. It's not even the toy. Or maybe it is the toy, but it's totally broken, and he would not want to get rid of those things. So when I tell you he's a borderline hoarder, I love my son, but he was a borderline hoarder. So I just stopped fighting that battle because I wasn't winning and it just wasn't worth the anguish. And I would be the one doing most of the work. And I was like, whatever, keep your mess in your room. And if that's the way you want to be, then that's fine. In that first week of changing his diet, and it wasn't, super clean. Like I said, he was doing those pizza pockets and the substitute type of foods, the chicken nuggets that I made for him. All of a sudden, one day he starts coming out of his room with like kitchen trash bags with, I didn't know what was in them. And I said, what are you doing, Zach? And he said, oh, cleaning my room. Just like nonchalant, like as if it was just normal, like just something that he did. Like, he hasn't cleaned his room once in his entire life, not on his own. And I think he brought out 12 full-size big kitchen trash bags full of trash that day. And I was just like, okay. And so I said, just make sure they get out to the trash can outside, because he was stacking them up by the back door and the pile was getting pretty huge. And by the next morning, I went to bed, and then by the next morning they were gone. So he remembered. And if you have a kid with ADHD, you know what I'm talking about. If not, trust me when I tell you, I could have told him 8 times to take that trash out and it still would have been sitting by the back door. Like, I told him one time, okay, that's great. Thanks for cleaning your room. Just make sure that stuff gets outside. And when I got up in the morning, it was all outside. Like, he had remembered to do that. And I was just like, what is happening? So then I asked him that next day, I said, so what'd you end up doing? And he said, oh, everything that was in like the main part of my room. So like not his closet, not under the bed, but just the main part of his room. He went through all of that. He got rid of everything that was trash. And then everything that he knew he wanted to keep, he had organized that into like bags. Like, it wasn't put away, but it was organized into categories. And that's what he had worked on. And then over the next several weeks, he proceeded to organize all of that stuff and put it away in its appropriate locations, continue to pare stuff down, get rid of stuff that was broken. Then he cleaned out on a different day. He cleaned out totally his closet. So his closet looks like a normal closet now. He cleaned out under his bed. So it's all empty under there instead of shoved full of stuff. And then just the last round he went through, because we're starting school up again this next week. Summer vacation for us is over. And he went through all of his clothes and he got rid of anything that was too small. And I had very little input. Like, I gave him a quick trick how to tell if a shirt was too small just by kind of holding it up instead of having to try on every single shirt, because he's like, I don't know if it's too small, And he just took over from there. And then he was like, and he was able to organize, like, these clothes are trash because they're threadbare and stretched out and stained or whatever. These clothes can go to my cousins, and these clothes I'm going to keep. And if you look in his closet right now, I'm not kidding, it's organized like in colors, like in colors, like red shirts, blue shirts. So it's pretty crazy. And it's not because I care that his room is clean. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the ability to look at an overwhelming task that before would have overwhelmed him, divide it into parts, into chunks that are doable, and then do them, actually get up and do them. He's never been able to do that. And when I asked him about it, he said it just before, it felt like there was this big wall or this thing blocking me from doing it. And it seemed so overwhelming that I would just sit down and watch YouTube, or I would just sit down and play a video game. Like, I knew should do it. It's not that he didn't know he should do it. It just felt impossible. It just felt so overwhelming to him that he didn't even know where to start. So he just wouldn't start. He would just procrastinate for all time and just never do it. So that was like the first thing I noticed. And since then, there's been like many more things like that, that he's started doing.
And so this is when he was cleaning his room. This was him at 15?
Yeah, he's 15. He's turning 16 next month. He's been doing this since February 1st of this year.
Wow. And
his initial agreement was for 30 days, but after the 30 days, I'm like, you want to keep going? He's like, yeah, he wants to keep going.
Wow.
Yeah.
And for you as a parent, for 15 years, you've been struggling with, what do I do? What does it feel like now?
It is like a sigh of relief. It is a breath of fresh air. I feel like I have the son that he was intended to be, because, underneath all of the tantrums and the fit throwing and the hitting and the screaming and the name calling that he would do, there's this loving little boy in there. Like, it's the little boy that used to say when he was really little, I'm going to marry you someday, mommy, right? You would see these little sweet moments like that, but they were by far overshadowed with, the anger monster that would come out over every little thing. And there was one point, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there was one point where I did not take my kids to family gatherings for 3 years because there was an incident at a family gathering. And the general consensus from the public, meaning at work where I teach, his school, and in my own family, was, it's my parenting. Like, my parenting stinks, and that's why he's behaving like that. So yeah, it's just like, now I have the kid that, it's like the kid that he really is, and he's not controlled by his emotions are not controlling him and, overwhelming him to an extent that he just he doesn't even know what to do with himself anymore. That's how he used to be. And now we've had 0 fits, 0 incidents in 6 months. There's been once or twice where I've been speaking to him about school, because school is still a challenge. It's not, everything's perfect. And you can see that he is starting to get upset. And in the past, if you pointed out that he was starting to get upset, that would send him off over the edge. Like, don't tell me. And then he would that was it. But I could see he was starting to get upset, and I just said something like, I can see that right now this conversation's overwhelming, or you're getting upset. Why don't we just put it on the back burner? We can talk about it tomorrow. And instead of just losing his mind and flipping out, which he would have done in the past, he just agreed to do that. And so I was like, whoa. So it's like this night and day difference. And I wanted to come on and talk with you because if there's any other parents, like, I was hopeless. I was very worried about what's going to happen when this kid gets bigger than me. And he's now bigger than me, right? Because he was throwing these very physical fits. And I was like, what's going to happen when he's bigger than I am? And he's a male and I'm a female. He's going to be bigger and stronger. Then what? Like, I was honestly worried that we were going to have to send him to some like military school, or the police were going to get involved or something. Honestly, it's like very sad for me to have to say that. But in those moments where he lost his mind, and there was no bringing him back except for through time, right? Time would over time, he would come back to quote unquote, normal or baseline or whatever you want to call it. But I never found a way to like snap him out of these things or prevent them from occurring until now.
Wow. And how has his like sensory things happened? Like you talked about, all five senses were heightened. Is
Yeah.
that improved at all?
So I think those things improved just not because of his diet change. It's we did a lot of occupational therapy. We worked on that a lot and just desensitizing some of those things. Honestly, I'm very shocked that he's eating eggs. He'll eat scrambled eggs with sausage. I didn't think that was going to happen, but just to let you know how bad it was in the past. At one point, I think he was 8 or 9 years old. We had gotten him a quesadilla. He liked just quesadilla, just tortilla cheese, like nothing else. He's eating his quesadilla, and all of a sudden, everything in his mouth just comes out, and he goes, "There's something in there." I'm like, "What's in there?" It was a grain of rice. So a grain of rice, he could not handle a grain of rice in his mouth. That's how oversensitized everything was. He used to have those noise canceling headphones at school. And I think with those type of symptoms, the occupational therapy did help with that. I feel like he was kind of handed a double whammy because with the sensory stuff and the ADHD, both of those lead to emotional dysregulation. So that emotional dysregulation was huge. And so even when his sensory issues were somewhat better, like he couldn't be in a room full of people. So like at school assemblies, he couldn't go to them or he'd have to wear those noise canceling headphones, or he'd have to be allowed to leave when it got to be too much or things like that. He had a hard time dealing with, like when he was a little kid, sitting on the carpet with other kids. He had to be in people's space and like touching them and doing all the stuff that you're not supposed to do. Because it's like on some levels he was craving input, and then on other levels the input was too much. So it took a lot of occupational therapy, and that did help slowly over time. And then just growing up, like I don't even think he knows. If you ask him about it, he's like, I'm just older and bigger, and I can just handle it more. So even though he feels it, he can manage it more, or he understands it more. I don't know, because I don't experience that, so it's hard for me to really articulate it, but certainly the emotional dysregulation aspect of it, which I think was the hardest to deal with, that's what the diet has really, really changed. So he goes and takes a shower now. Like I never have to ask him. He showers once a day. Like I can get into some of the other things. Like I used to fight with him to shower. He would never do it. He just showers without me ever saying a word. He's on time for school every single day. We would fight every single day. We'd be late every single day. I mentioned earlier, I'm a teacher. I sort of have to be at school on time. I have students in my classroom. Like I can't be late. We would have this talk every day, and he'd be late every day, and then one of us or both of us would be frustrated. He'd be crying, or I would. It was horrible just getting to school every day. And now we haven't had one issue. He knows what time he's supposed to be to the car, and he comes out. And then one day he came out, he was 3 minutes late, and he goes, "Sorry, I'm so late, Mom." So he's begun apologizing, admitting when he's not correct about something, saying thank you, saying I love you. These are things I never used to hear, and I hear them every single day now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really good. And as a parent myself, um, I can empathize to, although I can't imagine how it must have been. I can empathize to the point that, every kid is challenging when you're trying to get them out the door or something like that. But when
Mm-hmm.
that's 10x, 100x, I just, yeah, it
Yeah.
must have been a challenge.
Yeah. It was a daily, you would just wake up and you would feel like you had to sort of like armor yourself and prepare. And I got much better at like keeping my exterior calm, even if my interior was like, there could be roiling anger, like upsetness, frustration. Nope. My face was always this mask of, I'm not feeling any of that. Because as soon as I let that show, he would have to one up me. Like his emotional would have to one up me. So if I was mad, he was going to be madder. Right. It just made it worse. And that was, I was the one doing all the self-control. Like he had no self-control. I was, bending to try to accommodate him in every way I could. And that was not easy. And I wasn't good at it at the beginning because it's very, your children are supposed to, do what they're supposed to obey their parents. They're supposed to follow the rules. For the most part, they're all going to, of course, not do that from time to time. But every single day, he was going to challenge that authority, and not with big stuff. Like I said, just brushing teeth or just getting ready or whatever. I mean, just normal everyday things that just kind of happen would never happen in this house without a major undertaking on somebody's part. And then the level of like upsetness, it just depended on the day, but that was very difficult.
Yeah. So getting through school, I mean, you mentioned he has a high IQ. So that kind of the high IQ compensated for maybe the struggles with focus and things like that, to just be able to get him to the point where he started eating differently.
Yeah. So school is something we're still working on. I will tell you, so he's just started high school. So he's got 1 year of high school under his belt currently. His knowledge level, like his reading level, his math level, all of that is all on point, but it's the daily, like, you got to do this assignment. You have to take notes. Oh, taking notes. Don't even get me started. That was the other thing I don't think I said. We had IEPs, which is individualized education plan. It's like a special education. He currently has a 504. We took him off the IEP, but we put him on a 504, which is another type of plan you can have to like give accommodations. Now they're supposed to help the kid, right? They're supposed to be like, well, you have a hard time writing, so you can take notes on the computer. It gives them other ways to do things, but he doesn't take advantage of them. It's like he gets a certain number of extra days to complete assignments and he still won't complete them by the deadline. So generally what happens is he'll start off strong. This is like since middle school, he'll start off strong, and then he won't do an assignment somewhere. And then he goes back to try to pick that one up. And in the meantime, 3 more assignments go by the wayside. And then the next thing you know, his grades are in the tank. But here where we live, it's not, I mean, if you don't pass a class from kindergarten up through like 8th grade, pretty much if you don't pass, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to get held back. They're just going to you're just going to move on. Until you get to high school, right? Then all of a sudden, when you get to high school, if you don't pass a class, you have to make it up. You have to make it up either in summer school, or you have to do like the online version of that class, to make it up, because you can't get your diploma, your high school diploma, unless you have enough credits to do so. So like I said, we started the diet in February, which is already 2 months in, to the second semester. And, he told me like he's not sure how it's going to go this year, but he feels like maybe, we didn't start at the beginning of the semester. So by then his grades had already started happening. And although we saw results quickly, it's not like instantaneous. We carnivores know that, the benefits sort of stack up over time, and the longer you're doing it, the better you feel. So, he's got a solid 6 months under his belt at this point. We'll see what he chooses to do, but the second semester, he didn't pass geometry, the second semester of geometry, and he did not pass advanced English because you have to have a C to pass, and he did get a D. But in the summer school versions of those, he got A pluses. Like he got over 100% in geometry because there was even extra credit, which he chose to do. I'm like, who are you? Just do an extra credit. Don't even need it. Already have an A plus and just do the extra credit. And then in English, he got the A plus, but summer school is a very different animal too. So it's very like, it's a very tight window. And what did I say? He starts off strong. So one of those classes was 2 weeks and one of them was 3 weeks, like for the whole class. So I don't know what's going to happen, when he starts this, new school year going into 10th grade, sophomore year. We'll play it by ear. We'll go with the flow. We'll see what happens. We'll keep, on my channel, I'm definitely doing updates about this. I will keep people posted. We had a talk about how I can help keep him motivated without feeling overwhelmed. We came to an agreement. That was a crazy talk we had too, because he was like open to it, and we were negotiating and stuff and he wasn't arguing, and he was like thinking of his ideas, and then we came to an agreement of how it was going to be handled. I don't know. I don't know what he's going to choose to do or not do as far as academics. Really, he just needs to get a high school diploma. I gave up the dream of like having the kids with all A's and B's, even though both of my kids are smart enough to do that. It's, you know, just pass the class. Like, why do you want to be in summer school? Just pass the class the first time, so you don't have to retake it. That's what I hope, and that he comes out with with a diploma, and then he can find something. He's really interested in technology and computers. He knows a lot more about them. um every day he gets in there, like I'll see him on his computer and he's got all the code up there and he can do stuff behind the scenes I don't even know what he's doing. So I hope that he can find a job, in that kind of space, something that he loves. But just get the diploma, dude. So I can't say what's going to happen with that, but I can say that even during freshman year last year, he got like student of the month, and it wasn't for academics. Like, I think it was because his attitude changed. I don't know, but I was like, my kid is student of the month. What?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you kind of negotiating with him before.
Hmm.
So I guess sounds like one of the big changes that's really happened is, like, before you would have been quite shut out. It would have been like just talking to someone who wasn't really responsive to what, or if you tried to talk in a negotiating style or just a logical style, whatever, to him, like that's kind of your words are bouncing off him. But now it's like you can have a proper conversation and negotiate things and really kind of connect together better.
Absolutely. I would say that his style of communication was just argumentative. So he was going to argue with you. So no matter what you said, he was going to argue the opposite. And in that moment, like if you took a soundbite of those sentences, that paragraph of the conversation, it would sound like he was totally rational and logical. But if you listen to the whole conversation, like I said earlier, he would argue one side, and then when you try to go that way, okay, well, if you feel that way, then let's do this, this, and this. Well, no, because if you do that, that, and that, then that's going to be this way instead. And so he would argue that black is white and white is black, and or whatever, up is down and down is up, or round is square and square is round, and you could never get any kind of truly logical consensus over, like, how are we going to do this in a way that nobody's frustrated? It was just like he didn't want to do it, and so he would just argue you, just keep arguing. So it was just argumentative, and it didn't really matter what angle you tried to take at it. And even if you finally came to an agreement, like later he would say, well, that's not what we agreed, and then because this, and then, well, you said you were going to do this, but then you didn't, whatever. And then, yeah, he would just pick it apart, even if some of his arguments weren't true. In his mind, they were true, and there was no convincing him. You had to, like, have things in writing, and it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I was very shocked. He's also said he's become more social. So I said, we just had a really nice conversation. I think we talked for 45 minutes to an hour, and it wasn't all business. It was like in and out of, we were trying to figure out school stuff, but in between there, we were just talking about other stuff. And I said, wow, wow, that was just a really nice conversation. And he said, well, I think it's because I'm feeling a lot more social now. Like, I actually want to talk to people. That's what he said.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. So, the thing that's striking about this is it's only been a few months since
Yes.
he's changed his diet. So, yeah, I mean, what does the future hold? It's just it's really exciting to hear that people have such good results in such a short time, and it opens the future.
Yeah. If you ask him, he will tell you he doesn't think his ADHD is gone, but it used to be like this huge thing, like ADHD. And now it's like ADHD, like he can manage it. It's something he can manage. So he feels like it's still there, but it doesn't control him, or he's able to manage the symptoms. So yeah, I mean, only time will tell where he's going to go from here, but at least now I feel like he has like a hope, right? And he has tools and he knows what to do. Another thing is, he was asked, like, so when you're 18, like, do you think you'll still be eating this way? And he said yes. So even though if you talk to him, he's super nonchalant. He's like, I'm too cool. I'm a 15-year-old boy. I'm not going to admit that it's anything, this amazing thing. And also he doesn't remember like the meltdowns and stuff too. But you know, the fact that after the 30 days, when I said, well, it's been 30 days, what do you think? And he's clearly experiencing benefits because he agreed to keep right on going. He plans on continuing this into the future. And even when he goes like to friends' houses, I don't tell him when he goes to friends' houses, okay, they're going to have pizza. Don't you eat that pizza. I send food with him. I tell him if you want, you know, there's all, I think one time afterwards, I told him like, you could always just pick the toppings off the pizza and eat the cheese and pepperoni or whatever. You could do that if you want to or whatever. But yeah, he's gone to friends' houses a few times and they always have, you know, the pizza, the chips, the soda and all of that. And I'll send like some sausage and some cheese and he'll just eat that. And his friends are, you know, I know when I was a teenager, I would have been very worried about my friends are all going to think I'm weird, but he doesn't care. And I don't think that he just tells me they don't care, but he also says he doesn't, whatever. Like I'm just eating what I'm eating and they're eating what they're eating. And, you know, it's not a big deal.
Nice. So Christy, how can people find you on YouTube and stay up to date with what's going on with you and also what's going on with Zach?
Yeah, absolutely. So my channel's right down there in the bottom of the screen. It's at Meeting Wellness on YouTube. I have done several updates, and as we get underway, you know, when school gets started, you know, I'll definitely let people know what's going on that way. I think I need to make a playlist. So right now I don't have a playlist, but I've definitely done like some several updates, and there was even one where he got on and kind of told it from his perspective. The two of us recently did an interview, not on my channel, but on Alia Wells' channel, where she was asking, I was just kind of there in case he needed backup. But yeah, he talked from his perspective because I think it's important too, like, you know, for people to hear it from his mouth, especially if there's other teenagers, if they're hearing him talk as opposed to just me talk, maybe they would be more willing to give it a try. I'm also on Instagram at Meeting Wellness, but I don't post there as much, but I am there. And if people have questions and want to message me, you know, that is a good way to do it. If they want to talk to me or have questions on my channel too, I've posted like some of the recipes that I've done, to transition him over. I've posted a lot of those things. Oh, you know, he's given up sweet taste on his own, Dave. I forgot to say that part. So I'm just to add that in. So we were starting off doing like a keto cookie here and there. And he'd have like one each day. And now they're just sitting in the freezer. Like he's just weaned himself off. He just doesn't even want that stuff anymore. So anyway, but I do have those recipes for that transition, to kind of, because I feel like if you can't, they're 15, you can't just take away all the stuff they like, or it's not going to work. So I put all that stuff up on my channel for sure for people.
Awesome. So I'll link to those below. Christy, really happy to hear about how he's doing. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.